I know you all want to know that there is another trailblazer woman in the financial industry, and I have her today as my guest. I'm so excited. Welcome to Money Talks with Lynn Kitchen. Debra Morrison is in the house today. I am so excited to introduce Debra Morrison to everyone. Hi, Debra.
Thanks, Lynn. So pleased to be with you.
Well, listen to this, everyone. Debra Morrison is another one of these trailblazing women in the financial industry who has been a visionary leader, absolutely dedicated to a career of transforming women and their approach to wealth and power and possibility. I love that. Wealth, power, and possibility. So we're going to move into that, Debra, but I'd love you all to know that Debra has 47 years, yes, 47 years of experience as a seasoned certified financial planner, as well as a certified grief coach. And Debra has evolved into currently a sought after financial and leadership coach for women. And recently she just shared with me that many of her years, 20 years of her practice, she was also a financial fiduciary. I know you're going to want to know more about Debra, but first, let me tell you some more. Debra also has embraced her true calling and now is founder of a group called We Can Do It Women, where she is leading a revolution that I believe, and she will tell us more about it, redefining what it means to age powerfully, not just gracefully, but also powerfully. And this is so exciting. And I really am so delighted to have her on this show because I'm excited about her mission, which is to extend beyond financial education to encompass total life transformation. And she's going to tell you what that means. But basically, I think it means stepping out of the shadows and into the spotlight of your own life. Is that right, Debra? Stepping out of the shadows and moving into the spotlight?
Nailed
Let's
it.
start right there.
Nailed it, Lynn. Yes, we're so passionate about in our little Facebook group. We Can Do It Women 60 plus. Now, it was originally reserved for 60 and wiser. And then it was so funny, Lynn. We had people pining to be older. Women pining to be older. Yeah, they were like, I'm 59 and a half. Can I get in? It was hysterical. Anyway, I kind of messed up, I guess, by having it a private, but we changed it into a public group. And so now women of any age can join. And we have a bevy of women. We have 500 plus women now who gather together, and we are visioning each other and cheerleading each other to pursue the passions that we still have as the fire in our belly, maybe fanning the embers and
Yes.
saying, what is your next why? Because I think there's probably a next why in most all of us, because we've done whatever those duties have been. And now we're at a seasoned age and we got a ton of wisdom between our ears. And now it's time for us to step into the leaders that almost every single one of us are.
I know that is music to the ears of everyone hearing your voice today, Debra. And it is, certainly is something that I embrace, aspire to. And that's why I wanted to have your voice on this show today, because there is so much room for getting those fires, those embers fired up and continuing to glow and really create more light in the world. Those of us who have been through the financial industry and have longevity in the financial industry, I think are privileged. So it's our pleasure to really support women from a perspective, not just the financial perspective, but also what else can we do and what else and how can we fund our new dreams? So tell me a little bit about, one thing that we do have in common, you have over 47 years in the financial world. I have about 40, and I started, when I was 26. I'm sure you may have started at a young age, and yet you began as a CFP, Certified Financial Planner, a little bit different approach. Tell us how that came about, and maybe a few words about your early years, and then we'll move on to today. Would that be okay?
Yes, indeed. Well, I got introduced to the stock market and the stock market and money, et cetera. Well, by my grandfather, who was a stock market investor in the Great Depression. And
Hmm.
he handed me stocks, as all of us grandchildren. His fingers and his hands were trembling. He was not an emotional man. And he said, "Don't sell these, Debbie, until you have to." And there were shares of IC Industry, and I can't remember, Schlumberger, three stocks. And I was just like, there's something to that. It's not just paper, right? So then at age 8, my aunt takes us. I was raised on a humble beef cattle farm, Western Pennsylvania, Ohio border. And we didn't know culture at all. We just knew farm life. And so she took us to New York City because she was a resident of North New Jersey and very cultured and a #1 realtor and so, polished. And she took us to the New York Stock Exchange once. And I just leaned in, Lynn. I looked over and my nose was against the plexiglass. I'm sure my nose was flat as a pancake because I couldn't get close enough. And all the fist pumping and the guys and the shouting and the paper tickets in the day up to their calves and the lights and the flashing. And I had to be really whisked away so other people could actually proceed through. And I said to myself that day, I am going to be, of course, I never saw any little, girls or white, little white women down there of any age. But I said to myself that day, I'm going to be a part of that energy. And I have
Oh,
spoken about money as energy ever since.
great.
So
That,
I got
that
out of
is,
college. I got out of college real quick and wanted to do investing. And they were like, I
get
don't,
out of
okay,
here.
not going to put
Who do
money
you
into
think you
a
are?
girl, 21 years old. And so they said, why don't you just shuffle along and sell life insurance? I think they thought I'd be out the door in a week and a half. And I said, no, I've heard of it and so forth, but just explain the product. And they explained the product, Lynn. And I said to myself, wow, this keeps families together. It keeps business together in a very, emotional charged time. I can believe in that. I bought my own policy that day because I couldn't ever sell anything I didn't buy. And then I began selling with the passion of what it did for us. Right? No one likes to buy life insurance, but I'm telling you, I've never had a widow say, "Oh, that was a little too much. I'll turn that back." Right. So I led the agency for the next 2 years as a 21 and 22-year-old. And then I walked to the corner office and said, "Boys, I want to know about investing." They said,
So,
"Okay,
so this was an insurance agency that
yes."
you excelled at selling the insurance products because you saw the benefit of securing family and their intentions. Listen to that, everyone. Isn't that wonderful? That to be able to embrace what it means to secure one's financial future very early in life like that. You must have been a superstar and probably one of the first women who did that well.
I was often the only woman in a double ballroom at annual conferences.
Yeah. I
And
can
it was
imagine.
curious. You'll appreciate this, Lynn, because we both started as child labor, right? But the point is, when I was seeking out, like I went to a little small college. Believe me, we didn't have people coming to our campus to hire us. So I was looking around for investments, and I couldn't find any that had like a woman in a CEO position. And I stumbled upon John Hancock, which had a distributors subsidiary. That was their mutual fund arm, and then their PNC company had a woman CEO. And I said to myself, "Oh, okay, there's a semblance of hope there." And so I tested with them. Well, they deep sixed my test, lost it. And so I ended up going to Nationwide for about a half a day. I looked at the people around me. That's a long story, but I just decided this is like stupid. And quite frankly, they denied me a position. I applied as an underwriter because I thought that was a cool title. Now I have so much personality. You can imagine I would have been bored out of my mind. So it was God's grace that I didn't get it, but they gave that position to a man who had the same degree I did, and they told me I didn't have the right degree. I was there
Ooh.
only 4 hours, and I said, and the company rag came out and said, underwriter given to Joe Schmo, and I was like, oh my heart, I have the opportunity to file a sex discrimination suit, 4 hours on the job, or shake the dust from my sandals and move on. And I decided the latter. So I went back to John Hancock because they were calling me, "Oh my God, we deep sixed your exam and you went off the charts in sales ability." So that's how I ended up back in John Hancock. And so then I was going into their investment division under distributors. So that was kind of an interesting story.
So in the investment division of John Hancock, which was primarily and still is an insurance company, the investment division primarily was an opportunity to for mutual funds, and at that time, that was really the beginning of the industry growth of what we call mutual funds, which now has had an entire metamorphosis and potentially replaced by what we call ETFs or exchange traded funds. But back then, those baskets of stocks and bonds or other instruments were packaged in mutual funds. Could you talk a little bit about what that was like to move from insurance to then add mutual funds? And was it true that that step was the real key for you then to move into your own certified financial planning world?
Yes. Well, great question. Thanks, Lynn. And they told me, okay, I could go for the Series 6, which is allows you to sell mutual funds and annuities. Of course, they're high on annuities. And or I could go to the 7. And I thought, I'm going right to the 7. I want to sell stocks. This is what I remember, stocks, right? And so I went for the 7, and then I got the Series 64, 65, whatever, the registered principal. I mean, I went boom right up, such that I was asking, as I was going on appointments, Lynn, to sell life insurance, and often we would get these orphan cards, right? People that had already purchased a policy with the company and the agent had left or whatever. And so I would get a policy card and it says, oh, this person has $50,000 policy, go out. And a lot of people go out and churn the insurance for a new commission. But I was, I probably could count the people in one hand that really were, very disciplined and principled about selling insurance. And I was one of them. So I would go out and I would say, I'd like to see your, because I like a higher net worth person. I was like, I'd like to see your tax return. And they're like,
What?
no one's ever asked me to see the tax return before. And I said, I know, but I'm interested in your wealth. I mean, I don't know. I was graced with some downloads or some extra knowledge because this wasn't in the book. So I was particularly concerned about giving people good advice. And so I swiftly moved into I did sell a number of mutual funds for sure, and some occasional stocks, but mostly mutual funds. And then I swiftly moved into tax advantaged investments, so limited partnerships,
Yep.
some of which had ITCs and so forth. And so the aspect of moving into this more holistic aspect of financial planning was completely resonant with me. And it matched the clients where they were because they were living life and they were not happy at April 14th of the spring in paying excess taxes. And so I come in and say, has your CPA given you a money saving idea in the last year? And if the answer was no, I'd say, well, maybe we want to look for one that would. Because if you can save $1 in paying taxes, you might as well imagine that is increasing your portfolio. And it is. And so I was really always about the financial planning components, if you will, not singularly investments. Although, you could learn a lot on the news, even in the day, about
Well, I
investments.
think that really is what, potentially brought you into the forefront of being an expert far faster than most others, because just imagine everyone, if back in the day, if
1978.
you had the boldness to ask anybody for their tax forms, they mostly, as a woman especially, they would most likely say, drum you right out of the room. And who gave you the permission to even ask such a private question? Because that was really the bailiwick of
Yes.
only a very, very inward crowd, you see, of one's attorney, CPA, and not really allowed as a subject matter for investment people. So I really want to commend you. And so it sounds like that was your way. And I do remember in the late 1970s, early 80s, when the tax advantage investments were at their heyday right before the IRS changed the rules. And suddenly that whole business went down the tank. Or at least the tax shelters, I should say, tax shelters. It's not tax advantage investments, but the tax shelters business went down. And that was the beginning of when I went into my own investment world as my own early on as a broker dealer, and because of that, because my former firms, Oppenheimer, which you probably are familiar with, were forcing us to sell as their representative, forcing us to sell tax shelters that were more and more increasingly not in the interest of a client. And I thought, wait a minute, I'm sure you have been through that kind of scenario before. But anyway, this is so exciting because I know exactly, the trajectory of what you must have been through. Now, as you were moving into this area of wealth and taxation, insurance, financial annuities and or mutual funds, investments, Series 7, and then talk to us about how you had the courage to create your own CFP firm, certified financial planning firm.
Right.
As a
Well,
woman.
actually, thanks, Lynn. I had, I realized that a young girl in this business and attempting to talk to high money people, right? I did have one gray hair, and I would always train it right here. And and in the day, I was at an appointment, as we all were in the initial days, and like I was driving in the winter, of course, snow, to a house, I don't know, an hour away, and my car broke. Down, and I'm in a 3-piece suit with a beautiful coat and high heels, and I'm pushing my Valiant Slant 6 through an intersection. I come back to the office the next morning and I say, I need another car. And my general agent at the time said, how about a BMW? And I was so stupid and uncultured. I was like, what is a BMW, right? And so my office mate, a retired Navy colonel, said, I'll take you down to the BMW dealership. And my GA was like, yeah, because he knew that the car payment would be analogous to a mortgage payment and I had to sell more. Well, that was no problem. I did. Now, I graduated in, and then I went and was decided I'm going to need initials behind my name. And so I said, how about the CFP program? In the day, there was 6 levels, and you could take one every 6 months, and it took 3 years to complete it. So you would take as an exam in the morning, Lynn, or you would take an exam in the afternoon. And I said right away, I said, has anybody ever done it in less than 3 years? And people were like, no. And I said, well, how about if you took levels 1 and 2 and examined in the morning and in the afternoon, and then 3 and 4 and 5 and 6? They looked at me like I had 6 heads. And so I said, well, the worst I can do is I don't do it, right? And I have to repeat it. I went through the whole thing, a year and a half. Boom, I'm a CFP. Now, did I learn everything as well as I might have over the decades? No. But did I need it? No. I needed the CFP because, women have to be 8 times better. And so that helped me graduate into a certain other echelon, if you will. Now, I became equities director of an insurance company at the time. Then I moved into Lincoln National. And the financial planning firm that we had was beautiful, but it ended up getting disbanded and so forth. So I went to a company that I had placed a fair amount of life insurance with. And the general agent wanted me, and he said, yeah, we'd love to have you here. And I said, well, with all due respect, equity business trumps all of your, I don't even want to say that word, it supersedes all of your whole agency's business. So the only way I would come in is as equities director. And he goes, the job is yours. Oh, here's what I did. And you're going to like this. Your listeners will like this too, I think. So, in the day, all these wholesalers would come in and they say, we're number 1 in Lipper. We got 5 stars with Morningstar. And it just was like, it was stupid, right? Our people didn't know how to sell mutual funds. And I said, I just had this idea one night, stories. And so in the dot matrix time, I had a big, huge dot matrix banner, which I hung on this ballroom in this, large Ramada Inn where we had our meetings. And it said storylines. And I said to every wholesaler that comes in, you tell me a story about this cement company with a father and 2 sons or whatever, and they came from nothing to being ba-boom, 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 big. You tell me a story of something, some 1 or 2 stocks in your mutual fund, and I wouldn't let them in unless they agreed to that. I said, you mentioned Lipper once, you mentioned Morningstar and your ratings once, you will never be invited back. Because as you're a number 1 in Lipper, you're going to be number 2 the next month. I don't give two hoots about that. What I want our people to understand, much like my epiphany in terms of understanding life insurance, wow, I get it. Oh my gosh, stocks aren't the scary thing that we don't know anything about. Stocks are companies that make the sneakers that we wear and our kids wear. It's what gives us telephone and electric services. And so these stories really plugged my agents at the time, my reps in, and we increased the equities business 120% in the first 2 months. 2 months.
Woo-hoo.
Because people plugged into what it was that they were selling, which is growth.
Growth and really personal. It's really personal development. Yeah, it's personal development and what's in it for you. How can you grow? How can you have a better life by means of these vehicles? And how can you relate your personal success to, these vehicles? So that was brilliant. And you won that game.
Yes, I did.
Yay!
We all
That's
did.
amazing, Deborah.
People that never had invested in anything other than guarantees, right? Because you know as well as I do, Lynn, we were told, and in the day there was like only really one financial news, and it wasn't all day, I can tell you that. But nonetheless, whatever news was coming off the TV screens was about the stock market, risk and risk and risk, to the exclusion of the other R word with the stock market, which is return. And risk is the currency for our return. And the women heard the risk, risk, risk and said, geez, I better just stay here in bonds because I can't lose money in bonds.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, even today, our media is full of those risk, scare tactics. But that's how they sell newspapers. Of course, those are out of style now. But that's how they get eyeballs to tune in to CNBC and all of those other medias, Bloomberg. But that it raises a good point, and I love that you are bringing that forth, Deborah. Is that women, especially, I mean everyone, but especially women, are inculcated over time, and we back to our mothers and grandmothers. When we hear these negative emotions, we internalize them and we shrink.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but we do. Whereas, the men, the generation of men, somehow they take it on. They're just like men are from Mars, women are from Venus. they just react differently. They go, "Oh, I can save the day. I can fix this." But women shrink. And I have noticed that. And of course, it keeps women from, I think, excelling in finance and especially in becoming a great ace money manager on their own and having the confidence, calm confidence that the stock market doesn't have to be a scary place. In fact, as you mentioned, it can be a storyline of your success and how you can grow. So now let's fast forward, if you don't mind, Deborah, because I could listen to your stories all day long. But something that you mentioned to me before we got on our program today that I really want to highlight, and that is that there was some point in time when you shifted into being licensed as a fiduciary.
Yes. Yes.
The word fiduciary is very important, and I'd like to shed some light on that today for our audience. I've been asked a lot, what is a fiduciary and how is a fiduciary different?
Yes.
And money managers that many women interview over a course of weeks or months when they come into money, whether it's an inheritance or a divorce settlement or whatever. They interview investment managers. They interview all kinds of people who are hungry for their business, but they rarely hear the word fiduciary. And when they do, they go, "What's that? What does that mean? And should I have one?" And so forth. Could you give a little bit of insight and from your perspective of being a fiduciary for 20 years,
Yes.
what that has meant?
Well, Lynn, thanks, because there's a huge difference. And I always talk about the three types of financial advisors, and that's kind of in quote. Commissions, we get that. Life insurance, they sell a commission, that's what they do. Fee-based, they charge you a fee for the base plan, but on pages 3, 7, 9, 10, 14, 27, 67, 82, are big, huge recommendations for life insurance and highly commissionable annuities. So they get a fee on the plan from you. And then if when you buy all those products, they get the commission. So it's fee plus commission, fee based. And then there's fee only, which is fiduciary. And fiduciary have zero compensation related to their relationship with the client. So no commissions, no referral fees, no kickbacks, no wink, wink, have a lunch, nothing. And the average tenure of a fiduciary is 22 years in the business. So you're dealing with seasoned people here who have a lot between their ears and are worth paying a fee for. So the only way I was paid as a fiduciary is through a fee, not commission. I didn't give two rips if you had this insurance or that. Well, I did want to have you have the right insurance, but I was never, ever going to promote a product that was going to give me a commission. As a matter of fact, I was attempting to get fee only products, insurance products of various kinds, life, disability, long-term care, instead of having for my clients to pay a big fat commission because they knew how hefty the commissions were. So the fiduciary is giving advice based upon the goals of each client. I had 34 clients and I had 34 agendas. Matter of fact, many of them were couples, so I had 60 agendas, such that I was managing their money, their portfolio, their risk palette, and their temperament for their why, for their goal. A fiduciary is the only type of financial advisor who has signed an oath and whose number one priority is the goal of the client. This shocks many people. Your broker does not have or assume that moniker.
That's right. Not just broker, but most investment advisors.
So absolutely. Absolutely. So here's the deal.
And bankers. Especially bankers.
Especially, yeah, because you walk in and now it's not Bank of America, it's Merrill. I don't want to pick on anybody. It's just that it is. Now, it used to be that we would say fee only, but then fee based saw such of a lure to be fee only that they kept putting fee based and it kind of smushed them in. So the public was pretty confused, and I don't blame the public. So then you said fiduciary. Then you had people that wanted to be fiduciaries because it was the cachet, it was the purest way that you could get advice, and they would have a separate company. They would put a fiduciary. I get plate liquor. That's what we call it. I get invitations to steak dinners all the time in my mailbox, and the guy here is a local attorney, and he has fiduciary marked on it. But you have to now look because his other leg or two legs are in a commissionable company, which he owns, and he's getting commissions on the side, but he's promulgating that fiduciary because it has the allure. It is the creme de la creme. So here's what you have to do now. We're having to put so much onus on the average individual who does have another full-time job. If you see securities offered through, there's commission involved with this. So you can't just say fiduciary. And you really are wise. Every one of our listeners is wise to ask the person that you're attempting or imagining doing business with, if I do business with you, Mr. Client, Mr. Advisor, Mr. Advisor, and I purchase any product, will you receive a commission, a kickback, and a free lunch, any remuneration in that transaction? And if the answer is, if it's not no, shake the dust from your sandals and move on. That's just how I roll.
Yeah, that is interesting. And most people just don't know the amount of I'll call it backdoor remuneration or commissions, like even mutual funds with the 12B1 fees. And also, I want to bring in some of the current dangers I'm seeing, and I'm sure that you are too. And we could go really deep diving into this, but we won't have time today. But I just do want to mention one of the big risk things that I see on the horizon for investors who don't have fiduciary relationships with their investment advisors is that more and more investment advisors are going to be pushed and rewarded and incentivized into investments for their clients that are based on the new industry of private investments, private credit, and all of the kinds of businesses that are now being promulgated without transparency. And now there's a whole amount of our industry that's moving in, led by BlackRock and some of the larger companies, to take those products and push them through to individual 401k accounts. And guess who's going to be putting those products into their clients' accounts, because they're getting a back end fee in some way. It's going to potentially be your investment advisor. So beware. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. And as a practitioner, I unwound Lynn, three unsuitable investment sales to widows.
Yes.
Unsuitable sales. An agent from a large insurance company sells a widow right up the road from me a $438,000 variable annuity after she had told him she needs a new car, she needs to do her landscaping and everything else, and ties her up. So I get referred to her like 9 months later. Forget 30 days window. I'm outside of that. And I took, in each of these three cases, it takes about a year. You have to go to the insurance commissioner. You have to work on behalf. I never charged any of these widows anything. And each woman got back their principal and interest. But I'll tell you what, I didn't open the front door of my condo for 2 years without expecting to see a shotgun there, because he got charged back $68,000 commission.
The commission got charged back. Is, oh my gosh.
Well, he already had gone on the trip for two to Italy that he won, because they were incentivized for all kinds of perks. $68,000 commission. And he knew exactly who I was and where I lived. Hello. So, we have guts in the fiduciary world. Yes, we do. And our allegiance is to the client. And when fiduciary became available in 1999, I said to myself, I always imagined myself dealing with high net worth people. I never want anybody to say or think, Deborah, what's in this for you? If I move forward with it, what's in this for you? I never wanted that to be even come up in discussion, and it never did. But I said goodbye to almost 6 figures of renewal commission. All I had to do January 1 is open my eyes, and I got those 12B1 and trail commissions. That's a big pill to swallow. Give up the registered principal, give up all of that to pursue, really principled financial planning. So when I'm on a seat in first class with a woman who says, what are you doing? I said in the day when I was practicing, I'm a fiduciary planner. And she goes, oh, just like my nephew. He just graduated from Northwestern and he's with Merrill Lynch. And I was like, well, not really.
Not like that. No, that's not the same.
No.
Not the same. That brings up the wisdom factor. Let's talk about not age, but wisdom. And it's interesting how young people, when they come on into the business, I don't care whether it's in the major firms on Wall Street, or through insurance, or through any entry point, there is a bravado that they carry, that they know everything. And it's interesting how over the years I've had so many people who say, oh, like you just said, my nephew just is in the business, my niece just entered the business, I want to support them, I want to give them my portfolio and so forth. And I say, good luck. You're moving into someone else's territory for a learning curve that they really have not been through. You and I have been through 40 years of up and down markets.
Yes.
Seeing the underbelly of the beast. The financial world is both wonderful and also ugly.
Yes, it is.
There's lots going on, both nationally and internationally, that we need to all be alert to. So I just really want to commend you for, hanging in there and being a stalwart for not just women, but for, the financial prudence and integrity, Deborah. And if no one has given you a gold star, let me do so today. You deserve it.
Thanks, Lynn.
Yeah.
And you as well. I mean, we were both pioneers. It's just, it wasn't really prevalent for women to be doing what we're doing. And you did, what, 2 levels of the CFA? I like genuflect to CFAs. I was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
that's
it is. It's and also 2 investment advisory firms purchased, built, and sold successfully. Now, you sold your firm, your CFP firm, and then moved into, I guess you sold the practice by means of you had your group of clients that was valuable to someone else and they bought the practice from you. Congratulations. And then you began to look around. Did it take very long for you to figure out what you wanted to do next?
Not at all. Because I looked early on in the industry, I mean, literally like the late 70s, and said, where is the most vulnerable time for people in their financial lives? And in the day, we had defined benefit pension plans, and those decisions as how do you receive your money were irrevocable. So if you had a person that thought, well, I'll just, knee jerk this reaction and this decision, and they opted for a 10-year payout because it was the higher amount, then it was irrevocable. They couldn't get out of it. And plus, when the people are nearing retirement, that's when they have the most money, i.e., if they make a misstep, it's going to be very, very costly. And so I said, boom, that's it. And so I just said, I'm getting my master's degree in retirement planning, which I did very early on. And so when I, came through the ranks of a practicing CFP, I would inherit heterosexual couples, divorced women, et cetera, single women, and they didn't have the foundation. So back to one of your points earlier, Lynn, it's not our fault we weren't taught about money. The socialization was horrible. I have a TEDx talk on that. It was bad. And so we say, it's not your fault you weren't taught about money. Don't worry your little head over that, Betty. Bob will handle it. Yeah, good. If Bob
Exactly.
doesn't die prematurely, or as I say, come home one day and trade you in for 230s. We can't have 60, 70-year-old women being suddenly single of one excuse or another, and then not knowing how to write a check. And so I said, I am going to focus on mature women. Their runway is shorter, longevity speaking. And so a misstep is going to be far costlier. A younger person has a lot more time for compounding. I'm focusing on this era of women, and I'm going to proverbially pop open their head, pull out that crap, and put good stuff in. And now let's go, right? And so I have always been very, very partial to older women. And when women are heard into speech, when I say to them, what is it you want to do? And when they pushed $1 million check across my desk and said, you can buy CDs anywhere in the world, right? I said, yes, I can. And they said, okay, buy me 10 $100,000 CDs. And the woman was a widow at 57. And I pushed the check right back across the desk. Now, you name me one broker that would have done that. Zero.
No.
And I said, I can do that. And I won't, because it would be malpractice, because you're 57 and you need something beyond an interest only return. You need your capital, your underlying investment to be volatile. Yes, it will gyrate up and down, but it will over time go up, and then an interest component. And that's what's going to keep pace with inflation. And she perked up and she came in closer to the desk and she said, how do we get started? And that's the eagerness that older women have when they're told the truth, Lynn. And you know this on your own pulses. Women are completely attentive, and we are very disciplined. We are hardwired for common sense. Money is common sense. And these women are really rock stars at it. And their only regret, of course, is that they didn't meet someone that gave them the truth earlier. And so what I say, I have a speech called this, What Wall Street Won't Tell You.
Beautiful. What Wall Street won't tell you. Do you hear that, everyone?
Plan. That's what they won't tell you, because they're giving you this product and that product and this product and that product. And you and I have both entertained women who have this bevy of products. They have no idea which ones are good, bad, indifferent, going to help them towards their goal. They just have these because they've typically been sold them. And so when we start with the engine of the train and we say, this is our plan and it's headed in the direction in which we want to go, and we will add cars onto that track behind that engine that support our mission, our map, our destination. And that's how you build a financial plan and wealth the swiftest way possible. Not by gathering a whole bunch of cars without the engine.
I love that. Thank you, Debra. You hit the nail on the head. Wealth building really does require understanding what the destination needs so that the type of vehicle that one invests in, many of which will get you to your destination, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but you have to understand what you own and what are the ramifications and which one's going to take you there. And that is where the education component comes in. So could you talk a little bit about how I know I'm doing the same thing in my own world, and we all have to come together and get better at this, and so that more and more and more women can get on board. Could you talk about your philosophy and how you are educating women, the educational component, not just emotional, but the actual real world education? Talk about that.
Well, I certainly do the blocking and tackling. And sometimes, so I say to people, you can kind of Google that. What I want to talk about is behavioral finance, because that is what is critical. If we have a plan, whether it's from a planner, ourselves, or the internet, and yet we fall off the plan, that's the issue. How do we get back on rather than languish, beat ourselves up for having gotten off the track? See,
Beautiful.
So I'm always talking about the behavioral aspects, because we can know all the right things to do. We can know how to probably stay trim, but sometimes we're packing a couple extra pounds because we add a couple foods that, in a perfect world wouldn't have been added. But life is life, and I don't want to be so rigid. Yet there is a necessity for women to understand that this is not a perfect path. Neither is grief recovery. It's not a straight line. No, it is not. Life throws curves. And with that basic plan, Lynn, then it gives you something to fall back on when the unexpected hits, when the early dementia, onset dementia, when the death of a child, when the loss of an income comes. You center back into the plan and you say, well, it's not quite what we planned. And yet we have something on which to rely and tweak rather than the absence of that. The other thing I like to point out to women is, and I hold this up all the time, I want us to be in relationship with this. Yes, there are 10 of them and they are real. And you don't see me bowing down to them. This is a tool. And so I say to all my women, I want you to go to the bank and I want you to get out $200 bills. And I want you to put one in your wallet. And I have one right here. I have a little thing, and I just came back from a flight. So it's not like I don't do this all the time. And there is my $100 bill.
Yay.
Now, the fact is,
always have cash.
People sometimes roll their eyes like, oh, Deborah, how pedantic. Wait a minute. If you are carrying around a $100 bill, you are not spending it. I am saying you are carrying it. It helps us raise our set point, right, Lynn? I mean, in the olden days, we were comfortable with the 10, a 5, a 20, a 50, maybe, but generally not this. If you are carrying this around knowing that you have it and you are not spending it, and you put another one on your bathroom window or mirror, whatever, now we are in relationship. Oh, I recognize that. I'm comfortable with that. I'm not afraid of that. How can that help me get where I want to go? And so then we could talk about investing. And I don't like a startup investor, of which we don't. I mean, you have some very sophisticated investors in your following, as do I. And yet a startup investor, I don't want you to go out and buy individual stocks until you have $250,000 in mutual funds or exchange traded funds, just because the risk is spread out, right? Who thought Tesla would do what it did? Who thought Enron would do what it did? I mean, big stocks in the Standard & Poor's 500, boom, right? I mean, I sold a put on Bank of America for my biggest client. It was in its fifth. I sold the put at 51 and it went down to $3 a share. He was like on the board of that bank. Who thought Bank of America was going to do that? No one. You are not as smart as perfect, right? If Warren Buffett can admit that at least 5 billion, that's what it would be, dollar missteps, who are we as women to think we're going to do this perfectly? And so I want to disabuse us of the notion. This is a journey that we are going to navigate. It's another one of my companies, Women Navigating Finances. You're going to take your financial car. You're going to go around this financial pothole, that risk, and you are going to get to your destination with as few detours as possible. Yet, if you take a misstep, and I don't like mistake, it's too permanent. Misstep connotes walking. We're still moving. You take an off ramp. Okay, off ramp. I know the on ramp, and we stay with it. We cannot castigate ourselves and stay mired in one mistake that we made 20 years ago, because while, I was raised Christian fundamentalist, like you had sins of omission and commission. Okay, so they didn't do any commission. They didn't do any action anymore, but they didn't do any buying. And so they had omission, right? And so they think that they are safe because they didn't make any more missteps. But what they've lost is all of that time value of money, i.e. compounding, which Einstein called the eighth wonder of the world. So that is the substance. I definitely understand the basics as you do. And we are there to hold the hands of our peeps and give them the courage to get up, dust themselves off, and take the next step with, principled structure and guidance. And then keep readjusting their why, because sometimes they haven't had a history of understanding their why. I asked high net worth people, what are we doing with this money? And they look at me and deer in the headlights, right? So play with me here, then tease that out. What is it? And people say, oh, no. Well, let me just say, I suspect you're not going to want to retire at a standard of living lower than what you have now. Oh, no. Okay, we start there, right? And then over the weeks, they start to prime that pump. And then I always did one. We wanted to go to Hawaii. This is not the time to say that over your partner's casket.
That's right. Yeah. And that really brings up another point, and that is grief. Everyone, and I want you to know that Debra is an expert in grief support. You actually have a designation. Is that a book?
Yeah.
Oh, you've written?
My husband died. Now what?
Now what? Oh, what a great book.
Yeah. It's half grief recovery tips, Lynn, and half financial tripwires to avoid.
Beautiful. We'll put that in the show notes. I'm so glad that you brought that forth.
Yes.
And, I too have a grief support background. I was a licensed spiritual practitioner for 10 years working with the grief. And I noticed that many women grieve over lost money of the past, that mistakes that they've made, and that it makes them super hyper fearful of making another mistake because they went through and continue to beat themselves up and grieve over it as if it will never ever change. And I'm wondering, how can we as women get over that? Because that too is programmed. Grief is a programmed response. And could you just give a little talk or insight on how you feel about that?
I can. I had so many women come into my office and they were all hunched over, literally, like their head was hanging. And they say, I made a horrible mistake. And so I'd sit them down. I get my notepad and my pen and say, okay, Betty, what, tell me about this. Well, October 1st, 2000, I lost $6,000 in the stock market. Okay, Betty, October 1st, 2000, you lost $6,000 in the stock market. What else? That's all she said. I say,
is that all?
Betty, if this is all, we're golden. Let's move forward. And there again, she becomes erect in her chair and she leans to the desk and she says, how can I move forward? And I say, we're going to move forward little steps at a time. We're going to give you little wins on which you're going to build. And those wins are going to compound and you're going to see the other side of investing, which is very fruitful. And it's unfortunate that you had that misstep. And yet you weren't taught how to do this. So you probably thought, I'm going to step out and take some action. And you took some action and maybe it didn't turn out, or maybe it was a good long-term investment, but you shortened it because you didn't know the time duration, perhaps, of an equity investment, which is longer than a CD. And so there is no shame in that. We are shedding the shame. We are taking radical responsibility for who we are right now. And we are going to map a path forward that gives you wins. And then the wins are going to beget wins, and beget wins. Yes, there's going to be some disappointment, but just like we mix up a chocolate cake and we put it in the oven 360 degrees for 1 hour, no one puts good ingredients into a cake pan, throws it in the oven, and after 10 minutes gets curious and pulls it out. You are not going to have a chocolate cake. So don't go into stocks for a New York minute. You've got to get into stocks or anything with an underlying principal fluctuation into that for 7+ years. Can you make money shorter than that? Yes. I'm giving you guardrails, 7+ years. Most of us have 7+ years. And that brings us to another point. People come into my office, well, masters in retirement planning. People would kind of come in like at the last minute, like they had done it themselves their whole life. And then I think the wife kind of says, honey, let's go talk to a professional. And so they would come in and they said, well, we're 65. And I'm like, yeah, 2 of my 4 grandparents lived well into their 90s. We're planning to 100, right? And so and when these women came in, Lynn, and I think you've experienced this, when they told the teacher, if you will, right? When they told their deepest secret to the expert, and the expert says, sweat, it basically put that into perspective that they didn't have before.
Exactly.
This was their only foray. And as far as they're concerned, they messed up and they're never recovering. Well, I got news for you. Life is a game of longevity. It's a tenacity type of experience, just like raising a child or even paying attention to a niece or nephew or being in a long-term relationship. Heavens to Murgatroyd. No one ever knows step 9, 10, 11, 12, and you're not going to know it in investing. So what you do is you spread your risk around. In a perfect world, you have some diversification. So if you look at your Roth and you look at your traditional and maybe your partners if you have one, and then you look at your 401k or 403b and your other savings, and one broker has put Tweedy Brown or TD Ameritrade, or T. Rowe Price or Oppenheimer into every one of those things, that's not right, because every one of those things is taxed differently. So we want to be effectively diversified. I tell these stories. I had a woman come in, she spreads 27 Fidelity mutual fund statements in front of me. I'm properly diversified. I said, well, you got a lot of Fidelity, and Fidelity is pretty growthy. In a value market.
7 of the same things.
All their top holdings, Lynn, were like the same, right? So, all right. So we know that. The point is diversification, just like in all of life. You see, I think, and I was raised on a farm, I think women are so hardwired with common sense. We have that. I study the brain a lot. We have that neuron chit chat that men don't have. Men are more like, we do. Maybe this, maybe that, maybe this, maybe that. And so I think we have money over here in this silo because we don't really know about it. We just think, oh boy, that could really hurt, or it did hurt. And I'm keeping it over here in this silo. And boy, I'm coming in, I'm rolling up my sleeves, and I'm saying, I'm bringing that silo right here, and I'm putting it right in front of us. And we are going to deal, because once I chunk it down, we can take steps that are empowering. And now a woman gains confidence. Hey, this isn't as hard as I thought. And
exactly.
When I deal with widows, especially, I speak at widow conferences and I give one-on-ones afterwards, and they line up. And more often than not, the widow walks away and says, I'm not as bad off as I thought when I talked.
There you go. I did make some good choices along the way, didn't I? Yes. Well, that is amazing. And everyone, you can see the passion that Debra has here. And let this sink in. Let this sink into your heart, to your life. We all have so much wisdom inside ourselves, especially as women. And as you all know, this is an opportunity. This is the day for you to give yourself credit and give yourself a little bit of a breathing space from all of your previous denigrations and whoever's been putting you down. This is the day of taking all the chains off, giving yourself freedom. And Debra is here with me, and together, we're both 2 women who have been through over 40 years each. That's like, we can add we're nearly 80, maybe over 80 years of combined experience here. So we know what we're talking about. We want you to hear this. And we've got megaphones out, and we want you to share this, please, at least with 2 other women. That's your assignment today. Share this with 2 other women. Now, I want you also to know how to get in touch with Debra. Please, Debra, give us how everyone can get in touch with you and talk a little bit about your program.
Well, thanks. And I'm giving away a little gift. I think that you'll have that in the show notes. And it's 13 not so obvious financial planning tips or something. Because financial planning, people tend to zero in on investments because there's a lot of information about it. But financial planning is huge. And so we want to know about risk management. And so I'm giving that away. And it's really a list that kind of actuates something in every area of financial planning. And so I think it might toggle our reader's mind and our listener's mind to say, oh, I'm good on 8 of these, but boy, I could attend to these. So that's your free gift. And you can write to me at team, TEAM, at wecandoitwomen.com. That's my website, wecandoitwomen.com. Team at wecandoitwomen.com. I own the trademark. It is completely resonant with who I am. I'm a cheerleader. I believe in you, women. I value you, and I will believe in you when you do not believe in yourself.
Okay.
Because you can do this.
Okay. Those of you who need to hear that, just pay attention. And this will be such a gift for you to give to your women colleagues, friends, relatives. Please share this podcast, will you please, with your closest buddies and every female that you love, so that we can all get better together.
That's
and
right.
Grow into the powerful women that we already are, be able to create a life that we love, bring the dreams that we have in our heart to fruition by means of funding them wisely, and then creating a legacy for generations to come. Can I have an amen on that? High five. Yes, yes. I know. Deborah says a yes, yes right there.
Every one of us is high-fiving right now. Absolutely.
All right. Well, Deborah, thank you so much for being with us today. Do you have any final comments or anything that you'd like to share with our audience today?
Well, yes, it's never too late to adjust your finances. I mean, when was the best time to plant a tree? Yeah, 20 years, and the next best now, because time, it is a wasting, and time, compounding can either, as Einstein said, work for us if we have money in the markets, or against us if we don't, because then we're running catch up. We still have to beat inflation and taxes, and so that's so valuable. And I had women come to me in droves. I'm too stupid. I can't get math. That's too late. Nonsense. You didn't know a nickel about soccer until your granddaughter bounded through the door and said, "Grandma, I'm going to be on the soccer team." And then you're coaching from the stands. When we want to know something, we know it, we learn it, and we are smart women, and we are going to learn this money at the hands of teachers like Lynn and I, not your white male person who mansplains things. Go someplace where, and this is what I always say, if your mind isn't welcome there, your money, I don't want you putting your money there. If your mind isn't valued, if you go in with particularly a male partner and all the male advisor or even the female advisor does it talk to the man, that's why women get a different advisor when they get divorced or whatever. So where your mind isn't welcome, I don't want your money to go there. I want our minds to be welcome.
I love that. That is amazing. And remember, it's never too late. It's not too late for you. Today's the day. Pick up the phone. Go for Deborah's gifts that she has here for you today. These tips could potentially change not just your day, not just your month, not just your year, your life. Okay, so if you're in with that, then take some action today and spread the word. All right. Well, thank you so much, Deborah. It's been so fun. And I so appreciate you. Thank you for being with us today.
And thank you for the great work you're doing. I really applaud you.
And me, you too.
Thanks
again. All right, everyone. Until next time on Money Talks with Lynn Kitchen. See you next time. Thanks. Bye for now.